that we may want to discuss. The reason being, so like, pop by my parents' house, and my mom, she's not feeling well, so she's like, oh, I'll just vote by email. I talked to my brother, and he's like, well, I mean, I fully support everything you're doing, and so I don't need to go tonight. I was like, but we need you guys for quorum, and that's the challenge, and so like, I think it needs to be addressed, because the more, like, the trend now is like, everyone's just.
Steve and I just talked about it, but I think we're gonna put a cutoff.
Yeah.
Of doing this.
Yeah.
At the end of this year.
Yeah.
Say, at the end of this year.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Go back to the whole.
Right, we don't have a quorum, we don't have a quorum.
Yep.
Right?
But I just think people find it more convenient than to have to drive in. Like, for example, for myself, I live in Leamington, right?
Yeah.
To make a separate trip out on Tuesday night.
Yeah, no, Bonnie, I told Bonnie, so
Yeah. Yeah.
But, she's still groggy, but, yeah, you're right. There's some people who are, like being,
Yeah.
I support it, so why am I?
Yeah.
Drive in and.
Yeah, make a separate trip just to show my face and get my vote, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's going to be a continual challenge for us in obtaining quorum. It's not even necessarily people not caring. I experienced the same thing in like dealing with the public and getting public support for things. The people that show up are typically the people that aren't happy. The people that don't show up, which is the vast majority, they're whatever. Like, it is what it is, you know. But those are the ones you don't typically hear from, and then it's hard to gauge unless they actually show up and voice their concerns or their support. You don't get it on record.
Yeah, I printed off 150 ballots and told Steve, I said, hopefully I need them, but I don't.
Yep.
Better to be over-prepared.
I was also curious to know, is there not something in there about proxy votes? Like, for example, my dad was going to show up tonight. My mom's sick. Can my mom assign a proxy to my dad? Or can my brother assign a proxy to my dad?
No, there's, if people are out of town.
Yeah.
Or can't attend. What was it? Exempt members from, active membership. So that's basically removing people from active membership if they can't attend, but,
It's also weird. It has residency in the city of Windsor.
that's one of the things Susan's, like, we live in Amherst, you live in Leamington.
Yeah, I live in Leamington. So
So
how?
those things like that have to be removed.
Yeah.
But
But even its location on the east side. So I mean, you can't be exclusive to the city of Windsor, that when geographically Tecumseh is closer than the West End. Yeah.
That's true. So things like that are gonna have to be changed, but, but I don't see the 2/3 deviation, so I think Darren brought up the same point concern you had, that we have to put a cutoff for these type of.
Oh, we don't want to be doing it, because I think a month on this side is 2 months on the other side.
Yeah.
So if we don't get it, if you don't say, okay, fine the gate.
Yeah, now that, things are opening up a little bit more, and people are out.
Well, they're going to baseball game, I know baseball, I did an umpire baseball game last night, and a lot of people over to Tecumseh Park.
Yep.
Over at my house.
Yep.
So, I mean,
Yeah, the organized sports is,
yeah, if I go hockey arena, there's nothing bigger than hockey.
they're back to their schedules and that, so.
Yep.
But we're still at 50% capacity, so. Oh, goodness gracious. Oh.
Is Jenny showing up tonight?
No. She had some. We have an old dog that's.
Nice last line.
And we don't talk about her at home, but
Yeah.
she's almost 18 years old.
Ooh, that's pretty older dog.
It is. And we don't like to leave her alone too long, so.
Our dog passed away, earlier this year. She was 12, had cancer for a few months, but.
She's as healthy as a horse. When she goes out, a little bit of arthritis. She's a terrier. She's not a big dog.
That's a sad day when
Oh, tell
family
me.
dog dies.
We did it before, and I said to myself, I know this is terrible, but I sometimes wish they could just get run over by a car. I've had dogs get run over by a car.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot easier than taken to a vet. I'm telling you right now.
We were supposed to put our dog down,
a day and a half.
Here's a good life for God.
Well, we've had her since she's been 8 months old, so. And then we got another little perp. We got a rescue from the Bonita side. It's a little Yorkie something. It's a rescue dog.
We had a golden doodle, perfect, great dog.
Oh, they're
They don't
beautiful.
shed, you could, kids could pull it, if they don't have it, they're
Yeah, they're a nice dog.
And then we just got a double doodle, which is a, golden doodle and a labradoodle. The thing, it's a little bit bigger. It's a problem dog too. But like, they're probably, and they don't shed.
Yeah.
That was a stipulation.
Yeah.
Wanting to give them.
That's good for me too.
Getting a dog is no shedding.
We want, yeah, one, but, yeah, the shedding thing's a big thing.
Absolutely.
Also in Europe, it's very different, like, dogs are not indoors, like this.
No.
No.
When I was
It's not a thing.
Oh, our dog, no, growing up, a dog came in, well, not too often.
No, our dog only came in when there's a bad snowstorm.
Yeah.
No, she was out, I had dogs ever since I was,
So that's changed a lot.
And Dad
Now,
had-
now even like your neighbor will call Humane Society.
Oh, if you leave your dog.
Oh, yeah.
Your dog outside, and our dog would get on the leash and go to the dog house, and it would have to be storming for the end of winter for us to bring the dog in.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, all right.
we were, or Francis had huskies, we couldn't get him in anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Sheesh. Standing there calling, and they look at you and say, no, no, no.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, so. That, yeah, those ones, like, the golden doodle was perfect, she was only this big.
Yeah.
Travel,
I like big dogs, I like big dogs.
yeah, this one, the one we got now, he's 45 pounds, 6 months. He's a, and that's about as tall as I can get, but
Yeah.
he's,
I think Tim's got a golden doodle. They don't shed. They're nice
and
dogs.
then during COVID, because of COVID, it was hard to even
I know.
Kids were like,
They're one of the
I
neighborhood.
didn't want a dog, like, I was fine,
Yeah.
but everybody else wanted a dog, so we looked at breeders, and they're
Crazy.
Oh,
So,
ridiculous.
so this one came,
I've heard.
this one came to be friends of Isaac's. They had a litter and a couple people backed out, and the one, daughter emailed Isaac and said, hey, so we have someone back out, the price was half decent.
Yeah.
So, they were just doing it, well, there's no paperwork.
No. And that's the whole separate side of it, if you want to look at paperwork or.
We looked at it too, there's another thing you could do, is we looked at, you can get a dog, so you, the breeders in Windsor will ship it, you can pick a dog, female dog, or male, but usually female, you bring the dog home. When the dog's ready to breed, you take the dog in, and the dog's gone for a few
Yeah.
weeks, and then the dog's gone for 8 months, or no, 8 weeks when it delivers.
Yeah.
So you're kind of, the dog's attachment to the family, there's a lot of work, and if you put the dog through 3 litters, I think.
Yeah.
3 or 4 litters, and then the dog cures.
Really?
So you're kind of half thinking, well, that's gotta be stressful. Too, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
To be away from its owners.
So if you get the dogs free?
The dog's free.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be owner paying over $40,000.
Yeah.
for the dog.
Yeah.
Correct.
I was at, umpired a baseball game in Woodley a couple of weeks ago, and there was a lady there with the dog. It was a whippet. I said, is that a whippet or a small greyhound? Well, you know, they're different. I said, we have to. And there's a breeder in Rosewood. She breeds whippets. But what she does is she goes through the litter. They paid $1,500 for this dog. But if you want to show the dog, then it's up to $3,000 for it. And they said, no, we're not going to. And this one had a little, I don't know, some imperfection, whatever it was. I don't know, one ear was lower than the other, no idea. But they got, well, even 1,500 is that. And we got our little guy for 500 from the Humane Society. But all those dogs they got in from Texas, they've been all dogs.
Oh, have they?
Yeah, they're all clubs. Some are they have a shot collar for the dog. Now, they put it on when he was out, and like, I mean, it buzzes, it's more like a buzz. In the beginning, as a puppy, you have to be careful, but it's amazing, he'll go out, now, you press it once, and boy, he makes a beeline home, he doesn't want to be out there.
But you would set it up like
Yeah, or you can set it.
geographic.
Yeah, yeah, and you can set it, distance-wise, you can set it, strength-wise, so. It's like one of those, remember those hamburgers used to have shaky?
Oh, yeah, miniatures of the.
It's like one of those, that's basically what it does, but it will.
We use it on the park all the time.
Yeah.
Neighbor see the dog in the park.
Yeah.
Or in public with dog. Very good.
So you guys actually want a video right now.
Okay. Oh, it's a good sign or bad sign?
Just saying on video.
On video. We are live.
Hey, Pastor Jim.
Good evening, I don't know if this is on yet, John? Check, check. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out to this very important meeting. Before we begin, I'll just maybe just open us with a word of prayer. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, as we open this meeting, we just praise for the many ways that you have blessed Banwell. It's with joy and thanksgiving, Father, that we serve you and your church. Father, we just ask that you would speak to us this evening with reaffirmation of the direction for Banwell. We pray that our words would honor you and that our discussions would be filled with love. In your name we pray, Father. Amen. So before we begin the formal meeting, I'm going to ask Steve Aiken to come up for a motion in order to allow us to conduct the meeting.
Thanks, Dave. Hello, everybody, both in the church and out there. Normally, everybody would be gathered here to do our vote, but in the middle of a pandemic, it's many people don't feel safe to be here. So I'm going to make a motion, and it's going to be worded like this. In light of the current pandemic, I move that we suspend the rules requiring in-person voting, such that we accept email and phone votes for this meeting's motions up to and including October the 4th. And because because the motion is to suspend the rules, it requires not a majority vote, but a two-thirds of the two-thirds of the votes cast have to be in favor of the motion to pass.
Thanks, Steve. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Aaron Blada. Is there any discussion on that motion? All those in favor? Okay, great, thank you. Opposed? Sorry about that. So that motion has been passed. I would now ask all members of Banwell if they can stand so we can do a quorum count. Sorry, Rob, I gotta make you stand. I know you're a little sore. So there's 43 members in attendance tonight. The quorum we require is 64. So as with Steve's motion, we'll obviously require people who are not able to attend to participate. Their votes will need to be counted as we go through this also in order for any motions to be approved from this evening. Thanks. Everyone may be seated. Again, before we get into the motions, there's a motion at the beginning that we'll need to make a motion to allow members in attendance to have their votes counted. So, motion number 1, to allow members of Banwell Community Church not in attendance to have their votes recorded for all motions from the September 28th meeting. Members not in attendance will have until October 4th to cast their votes. So would someone like to make a motion for that? Bruce Rand, is there a seconder? Cheryl? No, what Steve was doing is we don't have a quorum, so we couldn't, without that passing that motion, this motion wouldn't be able to be passed to allow their votes to continue. I know it sounds repetitive, but we're just trying to, because if we didn't have the quorum, if there wasn't an allowance to allow those people to make up the quorum, then this motion wouldn't pass and their votes couldn't be counted. So his motion was really just the quorum, yeah. So now what we're doing is we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to vote, and we know that there's not some people don't feel comfortable or aren't able to come out for the meeting, so we want to make sure that their votes count also, and that's what this motion is. So we have a mover and a seconder. Is there any other discussion on that motion? All those in favor? Yep, sure, Rob.
I'll try to get loud enough. Was there any consideration given to having this meeting after Sunday service in order to get
Yeah, I know that the attendance has been up higher the last few weeks for sure. When we put forth the meeting and notice early in September, yeah, we did not consider doing it on the Sunday. We wanted to just do it on the Tuesday night because we had been doing other meetings on Tuesday night, but going forward, it will be considered. Yeah. Craig?
Just a curiosity point on quorum, it's 64, I believe.
Yep.
What percentage of the congregation does that entail?
That's 30% of the 30% of the active members.
I mean, personally, it struck me as kind of strange that it would be that low.
Yep.
When you're together as a board, do you have a quorum on decisions you make?
Yes, we have to have a quorum of members of the board present, and there's been times where I think this was a few years ago, there was bad weather, we didn't get enough people out, and we couldn't actually pass.
Is it that same level though, 30%?
I believe it is 30%, yeah. I'd have to look it up in the Constitution, Craig, but I don't have it off the top of my mind.
Only on that first issue that I think Steve brought up, it had to be 75%, is that correct?
2/3, 66, yeah. Yep, yep,
Just seems a little bit unusual.
yeah,
30% for a decision of this significance.
yeah. No, fair enough, and we're referencing our Constitution and the majority percentages for these business meetings.
But they're not majority percentages.
It's majority of the quorum, yeah, yep. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, Wayne? Yeah, there's 30, I think there's 30 people in total. So the provisions will be that they will be getting the correspondence and have the opportunity to vote. I should mention too that we're actually recording live right now this evening, so people are able to tune in, and they'll also be able to view this meeting on Facebook and YouTube afterwards. Okay. Susan?
But just a little correction, the quorum for a board meeting is the majority.
Okay.
The quorum for a church meeting is 30%.
30%. Thanks, Susan. Yeah, I couldn't remember exactly what the board meeting was. But, any other questions at all? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. Thank you. Before we begin with the two very important motions for this evening, I just want to kind of provide a little bit of history. We did have a forum for anybody to come out last Wednesday night to ask questions. We did have people out in attendance and a lot of good discussion. And we did post those answers to some of those questions that were posed last Wednesday evening. But this all stems to where we are today. It's quite a few years in the making. We've had two vision committees that have received feedback from the congregation where there's been discussions of a building expansion. But even prior to that, and Aaron alluded to it at our meeting last Wednesday evening, that when this church was first constructed, there were plans for a further expansion. So where we are getting to now is basically it's been a long road, and we're not done tonight. I think there's some confusion that people think that with the motions that we're voting on tonight, that if they are successful, that we'll move forward and put shovels in the ground tomorrow, and that's definitely not the case. All along the way, the congregation and the members of Banwell will have votes as we move along the process. So with the motions that are forward tonight, they still do not get us to putting shovels in the ground and expanding the building, and this is just another step in the process to move that way. So I hopefully help clear up some of that communication at that point. For these two motions, referencing, I think it's Article 1510 of the Constitution, a member of Banwell at a meeting can request a ballot count instead of a show of hands count, or the chairperson can request a ballot count. So because these two motions are very important and want to make sure people feel comfortable with their votes, as the chairperson, I'm going to be invoking that we do a ballot count for both of these motions this evening. So we do have ballots We do have ballots present that will be handed out for these motions. The counts tonight will not be communicated because we want to wait until the people at home also have their chance to vote on these motions. So we can't really say how many people voted yes or no this evening. We want to make sure everything's confidential until everybody has a chance to vote next Monday. So are there any questions on that before we move to the next step? Okay, so the first motion on the agenda, if we look at the screen, is to allow members of Banwell Community Church not in attendance, Motion 2, I apologize, to approve severance of 3.25 acres of land for the purpose of funding a multifunctional building expansion that could cost up to $2.5 million to design and construct. So would somebody like to make that motion? Barb Stevens? Is there a seconder to that motion? No, Ross Hickling? Okay, I'd ask Aaron Blatta now to come up. Aaron's been involved in a lot of the process, so if there are any questions for this motion, Aaron's well-versed in also helping to answer any questions that might come up forward. So are there any questions for that motion? Yeah, Vic?
Are we going to be allowed to come up and have comments about the motions together, or do we have to do it separately?
We're going to do the two motions separately.
For the people at home.
Oh, for the people at home.
No, for the people at home, can he just use the mic?
Oh, yeah, you have to come up here, I think, Vic, for the people at home to hear your comments. Sorry.
I'll come up when you invite me.
Okay. You're invited to come up and ask your question. Yeah, I should have mentioned that we do have a mic in the middle. If you do have a question, if you're able to come up to the mic. If you're not able to, we'll make arrangements for somebody to, Vladimir will take the mic to you.
Hey, I'd like to express my opposition to both those motions, number 2 and number 3, if that's okay at this time, just so I get all my points out of the way. They're similar.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's fair. Yep.
Yeah. I've had a couple of experiences besides my life experience of many years. And one of them is the fact that if you sell a property, you lose control over what happens to that property. And I had an experience with that when in business at one time when we wanted to do a capital expansion. So we sold the property adjoining to raise the funds. We sold it to a person who had these great plans and was very believable. We trusted him. And then we came along and found out he flipped it. It went to somebody else. It was a nightmare after that, and it really hampered what we tried to do. My point is, we don't have to sell this property tomorrow. We don't have to sell this property till 15 minutes before we have to pay the final bill almost. It's a transaction that can happen anywhere in the next few years. I mean, you said it yourself, Dave. It could be some time before we get the shovels in the ground, or for sure get the building completed. The other experience is when I was on the board of trustees of the old Temple Baptist Church, which provided a lot of the funding for this building here. Two things happened. The most important was we had been gifted $1 million by a widow, and we had that money invested. We kept it with the advisor that she had had for many years, and she'd been successful. However, this was in 1999, 2000, 2001. And what happened was the plans were coming to fruition here for this particular project. What happened was the money was invested in balanced funds. That was fine. But the trouble is we knew we needed the money. So we instructed them, the custodian of the funds, to move it into something like money market. So we had a set amount of money. If you look at the stock market returns for 2001, 2002, it was down 15% each year for 2 years. Had we not made that decision, it could have cost us up to $180,000,
Right.
Our calculation. It was a big number. So in other words, the money that you are coming to this project with is important, and that means that piece of property. So to sell it now, maybe 3 years away from when we need the money to actually buy it. The way real estate has been in Windsor, it's been a 25% increase, I think at least in the last couple of years. We don't know what's gonna happen. For us to sell that piece of property now gives us that risk that we're not gonna be tied to our requirements, because that building, we never know, materials are going out of sight. If we park that money now, what we end up with is if it goes up 10% a year on 2.5 million, we could be looking at $500,000 of shortage of funds because we couldn't wait to sell the property. I think I would support the motions, but I can't support the motions that we do this until we're almost got the roof on the building or some proximity to when we actually need the money. I don't think we can risk that kind of a gap between needing the money and selling the property. The other thing was, the other funding we did for this building was we sold 664 Victoria Avenue. We didn't sell that till this building was already under construction. So my thought is we don't give an open-ended sell on this. We tie it to some event so that we do not drift away too far from our funding.
Okay.
Okay?
Just to clarify for purposes, so basically, you're in favor of the expansion, but just not, I mean, if you could look at it, holding on to the 3.25 acres as a safety net, so to speak, until shovels are in the ground, so to speak, and then looking at what the market is and at that time, just to clarify.
I think more or less, yes.
Okay. We did look at a couple things. The one that we did look at was, I think we mentioned in the newsletter that we put out a few weeks ago, the funding for the expansion, that if we were to get a mortgage up to $2.5 million or fundraising, there would be a certain percentage that we would have to likely fund before the banks would even look at giving us a mortgage in the first place. That's one reason why we're looking at severing the land and selling the land ahead of time, is to have the money funded for the expansion ahead of time, because getting the mortgage was going to be difficult, we felt also.
I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've got a big asset here.
Yeah.
I'm sure the banks would line up to give us the money.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to put my sale of my asset too far away from when I actually going to need the money, especially with the conditions of real estate in
Yep.
Windsor these days.
Okay.
Inflation is crazy.
Yeah, I think we're all experiencing that, that's for sure. Thanks, Vic. Oh yeah, go ahead, Aaron. Just wanted to chime in for a second.
Vic, I think you make a great point. I actually don't believe that any of the motions behind me tonight actually mandate or require us to sell the land tomorrow. They are simply, tonight's meeting is more so about the direction of the church rather than the action by which we take tonight. And again, as Dave had kind of already alluded to, there can be some misconception about shovels being in the ground tomorrow. That's probably not going to happen, and Vic, you make a good point about the possibility of the value of the land going up between now and then. Tonight's motions are more so about collectively as a church coming to the direction of how do we want to go about with this expansion project, because we've identified that through consensus we want to do some sort of expansion. We know approximately what that expansion's going to be. We know approximately what it will cost us in today's dollars, and now we have to ask the question of how do we go about funding that. And as David indicated, one of the options was fundraising. Another one that we explored, just to ensure that we've done our due diligence, was to take a look at severing and then getting the estimates as to what we think the severance might get us in today's dollars. And again, those estimates could very well go up between now and then, but the numbers that we've gotten for both the design build and the value of the land are approximately equal at about between 2 and 2.5 million. And we really won't know unless we jump, and that's like in a lot of things in life, you don't know what to expect until you jump. The intent of tonight's motion is really just to ensure that everyone is in agreement with respect to the consideration of severing the land as a means of funding the expansion. It doesn't commit us to a time frame. It doesn't commit us to anything specific beyond the direction. And then the second motion is, the third motion that's up there is really just a continuation of that. If everyone is in agreement for us severing, then we would like to give a real estate agent the opportunity to market the property to see what kind of attention we could garner. And then from there, we would come back to the congregation for any type of approval before going with any type of sale. By no means would we trigger a sale without the membership's consent. I think I see another hand from Rob. Yep. Why don't you jump back in? Yep.
Thanks, Aaron.
Two points. The first one, I do apologize. I have not been able to, be around most recently. I know you had a lot of questions in a Q&A session out at the barbecue there. Last set of plans that I had talked about, if we sever, they most likely would have to have a shared driveway. So one of my concerns continues to be the fact that, we'd be throwing a boatload of pavement down, and all of a sudden we end up with a thoroughfare on the east side of the church here. So that continues to be a major concern of mine with regard to severance. I don't know if that is still one of the only options, so I'd like a response to that one. And then my second point is just more of a clarification, right? Because I don't want to sit there and say I'm confused, but again, the motion clearly is listed as to approve severance. So I just want it clear that, as somebody who has been here now for 16 years, I know that this is a long sought out process. This is not if motion 2 fails, it's not the end all. Hey, we're not going to be moving ahead with an expansion. It just means that we have to rethink, and it might be a bit of a longer road. So can somebody just speak to that?
Yeah, if motion number 1 fails to sever the land, basically, just to make sure, or motion number 2, to sever the land to fund the building, then the direction the church has given over the past several years, including the striking of the Building Expansion Committee 2 years ago, where we've had votes and we've had business meetings where people have approved the general concept of the expansion, not the details, obviously, just the general concept's been approved. Then we would have to go back and go, okay, the church has told us and voted on a building expansion. We have to rethink how we fund this expansion, right? And Vic mentioned, for example, trying to hold on until 2024, when maybe shovels are in the ground in 2023 or 2024 at that time, and then trying to get the funding for it, or just fundraising the whole $2.5 million, or a share. But you're right, if the motion number 1 fails, then we have to go back and rethink of how to fund this expansion, because that's been the direction of the church, and that's the direction that the church has given us over the last several years too.
Follow up to that, and Aaron can go back and talk to my first question afterwards, but I realize it's a pandemic. I realize that these meetings, the business meetings, haven't happened with the regularity that they normally would. I haven't seen, a report of church finances in quite some time right now because of the way we've been conducting our meetings. So, I personally have no idea what the church has there in savings right now towards this $2.5 million. I have no idea how much we have left on the mortgage of the current building. So I personally wouldn't feel comfortable voting on any of these motions without further information.
Okay, so we did some communication earlier this year. You're right, it hasn't been quarterly, Rob. For your information, just for the mortgage. So the mortgage really could be paid off at the end of this year with the finances that we have. If we let the mortgage just run its course, it's paid off early next year. In savings right now, Barb, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think it's around 200,000. Is 100,000 in contingency, and then another 100. I think there was another. It's 100,000 in contingency for sure, right? Is 83 in contingency? Okay, 83 in contingency. So 83,000's in the contingency, and the mortgage is due to be paid off at the latest, I think of May, April of next year.
April of 2023.
2022. Yep, 2022. Yep. And if we wanted to, as we mentioned, we did have some discussions with money in the contingency, or, you know, having it paid off by the end of this year, because it is open. And I know Barb did send some communication about the mortgage and that out to everybody a little earlier this year, so we could have that option. Okay, Craig? Oh, yeah, thanks, Gord. Yeah, you're right. Aaron, I'll let Aaron to speak with that, just that's his expertise with his business.
So Rob, thank you again for the question. I believe we answered that at Wednesday's meeting, but for those that weren't in attendance, I'd like to repeat that again for your benefit. So yeah, as David mentioned, that actually happens to be my area of expertise. I'm a professional traffic operations engineer, so I think I'm qualified to speak to it. So long story short, given the status of Banwell Road as a Type 2 RTO road, there is no chance that we're going to get any additional access to Banwell Road. So the only other option for an all-directional access is via, I believe that's McNorton, and it's McHugh on that side, right? Yeah, off of McNorton. So long story short, if any type of development were to happen back there, the only option for all-directional access would be via the existing access off of McNorton. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, and I pointed that out on Wednesday's meeting. It's not atypical to have these types of developments kind of coexist, especially in areas adjacent to Type 2 RTO roadways, where you have an all-directional access off of one side and a right-in, right-out access off of the main streets. And again, the one benefit, one of the most significant benefits that you would gain from it is actually via joint access agreement, you would have shared costs. So any plowing, we would share the cost with them, any maintenance, repairs, so on and so forth, the longevity of the asphalt. And probably if and when that were to happen, they would probably have to bust that all out and provide us with a new asphalt approach, and you can put that into the joint access agreement. It just requires a good lawyer and a good set of heads around the table to dictate what it is that you want in your joint access agreement. And again, it's not atypical. You could look at London, Toronto, even places here in Windsor have all kinds of joint access agreements whereby access in and out of sites is facilitated through other sites. So I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Sorry, just on that question, Rob talked about the congestion on the east side. My understanding from the drawing was that there's no thoroughfare on the east side. Am I wrong?
So again, it would allow reciprocal access. They could either go on this side or on that side. It really doesn't matter. Regardless of the type of development, even what was proposed in the concept plan with 106 units, for that type of a development, mid-rise with 6-story, the average rate is about 0.67 times that. So you can expect in the critical PM peak hour about maximum 67 trips. I'm just doing quick math in my head there. So 67 trips in the critical peak hour, that's the equivalent of a little bit more than one vehicle per minute. So I wouldn't say that as being congestion, and their peaks don't coincide with the peak traffic of the church. So I would also add that as a little tidbit there. Any other concerns or comments? Hearing none, thank you.
Craig, you had your hand up for...
Just one thing, I have never sold a home with a real estate agent here in Canada, but wondering, when you sign a contract, I assume you sign a contract with somebody, right? And is there anything in that contract that ties you up and says, hey, if we come here with Rosati and they got $2.5 million in their cookie jar, are we obligated to sell them?
No.
So, I mean, obviously, the agent's going to be in a bad mood if you don't sell.
Yeah.
But there's no legal obligation.
There's no legal obligation, and along with that, I know concerns about, we have the same concerns, right? We don't want certain establishments in the back there, and so there's conditions you can put on the sale of the property. You know, that we had one condition, I think we discussed, that we would obviously have a say in what type of construction takes place back there, but if we were to move to that, get to that point at least.
The other thing is just, sorry to bring it up again, but the 30% quorum thing, we're kind of, I think we're kind of saying with that quorum, we can go ahead with this, pretty significant, I'm not a rich guy, but 2.5 million seems like a lot of money. We can go ahead on a project like this and not have input at all from 70% of the people who will be affected by it. And that strikes, you know, having grown up in a democracy, it just kind of strikes me as a bit, I'm not even going to come up with a word, it just strikes me.
I think the average federal vote's about 35% of people that turn out.
That's all a scam anyway.
So, but, no, I mean,
I'm just
Yep.
voicing that, that's it, no, nothing further.
no, thanks, Craig. And, I mean, we are leaning on the Constitution, just going by the Constitution language, and that's, you know, what we're referencing. Yeah, well, we actually do have, there actually is some activity going on at the board level with the Constitution, not just mainly just, I'm diverting a little bit, but there's some cleanup in the Constitution that we are kind of going through right now. Nothing drastic changes or anything, just changes in the Constitution that we're going to bring forward to the membership at some point over the next year.
In the same way that you guys, I think I heard that you look for a majority when you're together as a board. It might make sense. I mean, I would ask that they at least consider
Yep.
that we have a majority for a quorum, be it 55% or whatever.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Are there any other questions on the first motion? Gord?
Okay, I was here last week, and Braden, if I can mention him, was questioning not so much directly the motion, but all of this windfall money, and it's all being used for our own good, that there wasn't thinking further out in terms of mission, etc. And that did get me thinking, I have to admit. I kind of thought Braden might be hopping up here before me, but what I would ask, and it has to do with the motion too there indirectly, for the purpose of funding, and I'm all for that, but maybe the powers that be should consider the biblical tithe. So let's say we got 2.5 million for it. Let's say, and you know, subtract off realtor fees, everything else. Let's say we ended up getting a windfall of 2 million from that property. I just challenge the powers that be to maybe consider giving 200,000, 10% away. And I'm not saying how to do it. It could be 10 mission organizations getting 20,000 each, but just, I think it does give us that mission consciousness, which we need. And of course, some people might say, well, that just means we have to raise another 200,000. Yes, yes.
Yep.
And I'm prepared to put my money where my mouth is. I think that's a good thing, that we would be challenged with this windfall. I can tell you, when I got a windfall. Joe Biden, because we worked in the U.S. for a year and a half, I got an economic impact check, and so did Marlene. A big check, $1,200 US for each of us. What did I do with it? I tithe off that, because that's what I do. I wasn't expecting it. So just not against anything, but I think it would be good for us. Thank you.
It's definitely a fair comment, and you know, on Braden's comments last week too, just as far as, you know, using the entire money, I think that is something that we would take into consideration, looking at that, not using the entire amount. But again, that would be discussion further along, but definitely something to think about Thanks, Gord. Are there any other questions, Braden?
Yeah, I just want clarification on motion two, because I'm on board with the severance. But when it says for the purpose of funding a multifunctioning building, can we just clarify whether or not that's completely funding a multifunctional building, or just in general towards the purpose of? Kind of like what Gord said, does it mean that everything that we sell the land for will go towards the building as a guarantee? Or is this leaving some leeway for us to make decisions like this still?
I believe it should allow us to make decisions on that, because there will be steps in the process. So when we come back to the congregation, if these motions are passed, let's say it's passed and we are allowed to list the property and an offer comes forward, we would obviously as a board wouldn't just accept that offer. That would come back to the congregation to vote on, where we could further discuss whether the entire amount or a portion of the amount is allocated from the sale of the property. But the intention of this severance and the sale of the property is to fund the majority of the expansion. So, any other questions on motion number one? Okay, thank you. I would ask Vladimir, so we do have ballots here. There should be pens or pencils in the pews. And, oh, yeah, Vic?
How are you allowed if it's an amendment? If somebody wants to make an amendment, how are you going to deal with these ballots?
Yeah, that's a good question. We would have to, what's that? Yeah, I don't want to raise the hands, just because we want to stick to the ballot. See, the ballots.
The Robert's Rules of Order, if somebody amends it and
Yeah.
it's approved, you vote on the amendment.
Right, yeah, you have to vote on the amendment, yeah. But I think Vic is saying if he does make a motion to amend or make a motion and it's voted on, the ballots are pre-printed, so I think that's what you're getting at, Vic, the logistics of it, because we've already pre-printed it's motion number, on the ballots, it just has motion number one. As amended, you'd have to handwrite as amended on it. Yep, I think that's the easiest way, just because logistically, they're already pre-printed. But Vic, if you want, so if somebody does want to make an amendment to the motion, if you want to, just so people at home can hear Vic.
I know Aaron responded to my comments by, this is just to get things started and to think, get things moving, but I don't feel comfortable with that kind of an open-ended motion. And I would, because then it falls in the hands of a board, or of the board. Board meetings go long, people get tired, things get done that we don't have the time to do like we do here. I'd like to make an amendment that we do not approve until we have at least poured the footings of the building. And I would make that for motion 2 and motion 3 as an amendment.
Hey, Dave, just to clarify about the way, so you can't do that the way you're doing it, because in order to vote on the amendment.
You have to vote on the.
Yeah, you have to vote on the amendment, Vic.
And then you vote for the amendment.
Right, we don't have a quorum. Yeah, we can't do it because we don't have a quorum present to vote on the amendment either.
So what are you gonna do?
Our option is to vote.
Yeah.
Either vote yes or no.
Yeah, we'd
If
ever,
you're opposed, you have to vote no.
Yeah.
Can we not take a hand vote on the amendments?
because there's not a quorum here for the, hey, Ross?
I think the situation also, if somebody at home wants to make an amendment, how do we
Yes.
discuss that?
So that's why it's yes and no.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's why really it's difficult to amend the motion.
So the motion
Yeah.
tonight is as stands, yes.
Yeah.
No, and if you don't agree with it,
Yeah.
any type of amendment, you vote no,
Yeah,
right?
I
Yeah.
appreciate Aaron's reassurances, but committees come and go and things get changed over time. I think
Yeah.
we're voting on something that's, we gotta act on it.
Yep. Just like Susan, what are you?
I'm not sure if it's a question, but from what I gather about building, if we decided we wanted to build there and do things and put in footings, it's gonna cost us $100,000 plus just for permission.
Well, it would cost us $100,000 just to decide to, for example, sever the land.
And then permissions for the property
Yeah.
and all of that kind of stuff, we would have to, in
Fund.
order to put footings in, we would have to
Yes, we
do
have to.
all
Yeah,
the
design
plans.
and everything, yeah.
A lot of cash up front.
Yep.
Right? Excellent.
We have to do some financing. I mean, you have to get building, financing. I don't think that's a big problem.
That would cost us a lot.
Well, yeah, we did the estimate just to sever, if we were to self-fund the severance, for example, of the property, it would be around $100,000, it could be up to $100,000 to do that. But yeah, I think, obviously, this motion is either just it stands, or, because it's difficult, it's either yes or no, because it's difficult to get people's inputs for an amendment also,
And if it's a no.
yeah.
you can.
So to
Yeah.
be clear, what are you doing? The people that are gonna write in from here or at home are gonna put as amended or not as amended?
They're just going to vote yes or no for this motion.
So what
So,
happens to the amendment?
so if they were to vote no to this motion, then we could do an amendment to it.
I think the problem is Robert's Rules of Order do not apply to mail-in, they
Yeah.
do not apply to Zoom-in, they only do apply to in-person assemblies. But that's all
But,
you can experience.
right, but we're in a unique, because we just have, yeah,
Robert's Rules of Order
yep,
only
apply,
to amendments if we had a quorum
right, but we don't have a quorum, so the motion has to stand, yeah, yeah, as is.
So am I shut out here? What's going on?
Yeah, I think the motion's standing, and then it's just a yes or no vote for people to vote at home and here. Any other questions? Okay, so Kim and Vladimir are going to hand out the ballots and collect them. Again, we will not be counting them or announcing any counts from these tonight until all the counts come in. Yeah, so if you want to, there's plenty there, so there's plenty there, so I think I can't vote. I don't think I can, yeah, you can, I can't. Yeah, you can, yep. Yeah, they should be in the pews, yep. Yep. You could write an abstain, yep. Just while they're handing out the ballots, we've had some discussion just before this meeting too, that now that things are starting to open up again, and we've been doing this for about a year and a half with these business meetings, we will be looking at coming to an end of at home and in person, but likely by the end of this year, so just stay tuned for that, just because we have to determine a time when we have to resume in-person business meetings, and hopefully by the end of this year, we can start off 2022 going that way. Just checking one of the boxes and then folding, and then they'll return them. Yep. And they'll. Yes. Thanks, Rob. They were pre-printed before we added the other motion for the voting at home. collected them all? Oh, those are the spares? Oh, spares? So these are the spares, I'll just, everybody's got them then? Right. Yeah, we'll just be collecting them right now. Everybody got one before I rip up the last of the spares? They're all collected then? So the second motion, again, if we, at the end of the day, when we do the counts with the people who are at home and they vote, and it's voted no, this next motion is irrelevant because we went list. So if, for whatever reason, let's say we had more people vote for motion number 3 versus 2, it would be irrelevant because we have to approve motion number 1. But logistically, we are going to vote on motion number 2 this evening anyways, in anticipation of, or sorry, number 3. I apologize. Should write I have number 3 here too. So that motion number 3 is a motion to list 3.25 acres with a realtor who specializes in property development, including attached conditions that would require the purchaser to obtain Banwell Community Church's approval regarding the intended land use. Oh, Ross?
Just for clarity, on that paper that was abstract, it says motion number 1.
Yeah, it's number 2. The wording is there. Yep.
The motion, the wording's there.
The wording is present. Yep. Yep. And I think Craig brought this up and there was some discussion earlier. So if we listed it with a realtor, it doesn't tie us into any conditions of accepting an offer with that realtor. If they came with the best offer in the world and we would have to take it to the congregation, and for whatever reason the membership wasn't willing to approve that offer, then we would just tell the realtor that we're not accepting the offer. So there's no commitments there for us to accept an offer and sell the land. Yeah.
If a real estate agent comes in and looks after the property, is there any guarantee after we sell it, or do we know before we sell it what's going there?
We can have a say in what's going there. So we can put conditions on the sale of the property to say residential development, such and such criteria in it, so that we don't get a strip plaza or something else behind there, or some other development. We can specify the conditions on the.
Yeah, but how much control does that really give us?
Aaron, you. Oh, yep. Oh, say thanks. Yep, thanks. Thanks, Gord. Yeah. So do I have a mover for motion number 3? Susan. Is there a seconder? Daniel Lada. Okay, now we can have discussion. Thanks, Gord. Appreciate that.
What guarantee do we have from the realtor or the person that buys the land, what he's gonna put like, they could say, you can't tell us what to put on our property that we just purchased from you.
Actually, we can put, lean on you again, your expertise in this, but yeah, we can put certain conditions.
So much like you would sell your home and you would put conditions on your home that, you need to move in by this date and I need to move out by that date, and you get to keep the appliances, and I get to keep the furniture or something like that. It'd be the exact same as far as the conditions on the sale of land. And it would also be conditional on their side. You have to remember, they don't have approval for severance at this point. And so the severing of the property would probably be conditional on their side, right? So they would offer us X number of dollars conditional upon them obtaining the approvals to sever and rezone the land for whatever use it is that they decide to use it for. And that's how that would work.
Where would this realtor come from? Would it come from Windsor? Would it come from Toronto?
Sorry, the realtor? The realtor that we have in mind is local, but I think he's listed like number 3 or whatever in all of Canada as far as like commercial real estate is considered. So has a pretty significant reach as far as the country is concerned.
Are there other questions for motion number 2? 3. Lesson learned for next time. I did the late addition with the agenda late this afternoon after the ballots had already been printed off, so apologize for confusing everybody. Yep.
So I think, Aaron, what you were suggesting is that the severance would be conditional on certain zoning. Is that where we feel that we would have some assurances what would go in there?
I'm not sure if you had the opportunity to review the 4 options that were explored at the board level, but the 4 options as presented were we could carry this on ourselves and follow through with the severance application, severance of rezoning. That land back there is worth nothing to nobody at the moment because it's you can't build anything on it until you get the severance, number 1, and number 2, the rezoning. And then you would need site plan approval and so on and so forth. So having been in the game for quite a while now, the development game, it takes a while, and not just time, but it also translates to money. So the early estimates, and I have gone through so we went through a pre-consultation application whereby the city provided us with their comments. The comments included miscellaneous things like they would want a noise report with respect to the Via Rail. They would want a traffic impact study in regards to the additional traffic generated and affecting the roadway network. They would want a stormwater management evaluation report. They would want a site servicing report. So the list goes on and on. There's a total of about, I think, 8 items, one of which is also a planning justification report, employment lands report, so on and so forth. In addition to the application costs themselves, which I think totaled something around $8,000 just for the rezoning and application. And then had we gone through all that, then we would have the opportunity to go in front of council to argue our case for the rezoning and the severing of the property for whatever land use we specified. So if you'll recall at the last meeting, we approved a concept plan by which to go forward with that pre-consultation. So only by knowing the approximate square footage of the building, the approximate size of what our severance would be, the 3.25 acres, could we then go to the city and ask for their comments. So knowing all that, having done our due diligence to determine how much that would cost, the estimate comes out to, and again, I would offer probably approximately $30,000 of engineering fees, just myself and my company. But that doesn't get us a whole lot of the way. We still need to foot the bill for an additional $45,000 for just the first round of reports and applications. And the city, in their good nature, always tends to require additional and follow-up reports and tweaks to the site plan, which triggers additional reports. And there are times, like my specialty is traffic, and there are times where I do 3-4 iterations of a report. So you can imagine, the cost, what I charge for one report, with multiple iterations, it can get expensive real quick. And that's if you're lucky and you don't get turned down at one or the other stages. So development is a risky game, and that's why we had recommended against getting too involved ourselves. The other reason why we had recommended against getting involved is developers tend to be the not so liked individuals at council meetings. The neighbors show up with their pitchforks and get all upset, right? And they pound the table insisting that this is not a conducive fit to the environment. And typically it relates in bad blood, but developers are used to it. They're used to being the bad guy in the room. We would be the bad guys, the church, if the neighbors were to show up and cause a stink. Not to say that they are. Actually, one of the neighbors already showed up and asked where can they give money to this expansion project. But there's always the chance that it might affect public relations, and as a result, we had recommended that this isn't what we do. This isn't what we do best. Our mission is for people, not development. And as a result, we have decided that collectively as a board that it's probably in the best interest of the church that we move forward with this option, see what kind of interest we'd gain from area developers, even probably up to the GTA. Like the demand for property right now is so hot, so we don't really even know what we would garner. We have some early estimates. We know approximately what the property development would cost us. We know approximately what our application and development fees would cost us. And so now we come back to the congregation to say, knowing all that, that land back there is effectively giving us no benefit. In fact, it's actually a liability, because if someone were to get hurt back there, it's a constant maintenance concern. If we don't cut the grass, the city sends us a bill, so on and so forth. So kind of weighing all these different options, we have elected to recommend motion number 2, see what kind of interest we might gain from developers who do this for a living, and see what they might be willing to offer us as a means of maybe working together towards a common goal. So does that answer your question? I feel like I kind of went around.
Pretty much. I
Yeah.
think if I was going to boil it down, I basically want to hear that, if it gets zoned for residential,
Yes.
we don't have to worry about.
Exactly. So, and that's, yep. So we would have that control if we were to do it ourselves and get the zoning done for residential. However, given the current state of the market, there's a high chance that whatever goes in there will probably be residential, just because there's huge mandates from the government. Any type of land that's within a current built-up area within a defined urban zone, all those properties like ours are being swallowed up by developers at very good rates, because they know that they'll be able to sell them for a whole lot more than they bought it for. So that's, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, yep.
How long will the contract be with the real estate?
With the real estate agent, I want to say up to 6 months, but because they said they would want 2 months to properly market the property, and that at least, and then obviously developers who are interested will need to do their homework and that also.
Just curious.
Yep. Yep. Any other questions at all?
Yeah, will you please read the motion,
Yep.
please?
So,
Same one that's on the screen?
yep, so it's motion number 3, a motion to list 3¼ acres with a realtor who specialized in property development, including attached conditions that would require the purchaser to obtain Banwell Community Church's approval regarding the intended land use. And that's you're welcome. Any other questions at all? So we'll do the same thing. We will hand out ballots. I'll take those ballots and put them in the envelope. Actually, those are extras too. You can keep them separate? Okay. Well, I'll put them in the, oh, you got 2 other ones? I'll throw these ones in the envelope. Yep, that's fine. Oh, motion number, yep, yeah, 3. Again, this will say number 2, but it's motion number 3. The wording is on the motion, so that's the important part. So just for everybody's purposes, I've sealed this envelope. We will not open this until the counts come in from people who are not in attendance. Once we receive the counts from the people that are in attendance, we'll have a few people present when we open up this one to complete the count, so that we don't know one way or another which way the counts are going. And we'll do the same with motion number 3.
These are the extras. Those are extras too. Oh, we're going to be doing collection. The collection will be taking place right now. Yeah. So while the votes are being taken up, thought Rob had his hand up. While the votes are taken up, I just asked Aaron, maybe he can give everyone an update on the search right now for the family and youth ministry position. Just a brief update. So the other update for tonight I was hoping to share with you all is just a quick update on where we stand with the Youth and Family Ministries pastor update. Long story short, we have advertised to the CBOQ. We figured we would start there and see what kind of interest we gain from within our own assembly. And after 2 months of searching, we have 0 candidates. So that, and by 0 candidates, I mean no one has even applied to the job. So I've gone through the process of even asking, friends within my own circle to kind of review it and see if it's something that would be attractive to them as, someone who works in ministry. And they said, oh yeah, like this is definitely a great offer. So it's not a question of offer. It's just for whatever reason within our CBOQ denomination, we're having a hard time attracting talent. Talked to Pastor Tim about it, and he had said that the reality is within the CBOQ, the majority of youth leaders are kind of in and around the Toronto area, and as with anything else in Windsor, it's tough to attract attention or a talent down this way from the GTA for whatever reason. So we have collectively agreed as a committee. Jim Wheeler back there is on the committee. I think Jenna took off. I think he had to take care of the kids. I got Beth on the committee. I have Vladimir's on there. Who else we got? A lot of people in this room. So we collectively got together and we said, well, we're going to kind of expand our consideration for a candidate outside the CBOQ, and that's kind of where we are now. We have decided that we're going to start taking a look at potentially Fellowship Baptists, trying to stick within our own denomination, as it were, as well as expanding it to the Heritage Seminary, which has an affiliation with the Fellowship Baptists. So we will see where that goes, and hopefully I can get back to you with another update as we look to close the next window of opportunity to sometime in December. Any questions or, yep?
Well, thanks for the update. You might consider Faith Today. They regularly comes out, I think 4 times a year, and every issue there's this kind of thing in there. Now obviously that's expanding it out of the Baptist umbrella, but if it's very clear that it's Banwell Community Church is a Baptist church affiliated with the CBOQ, then that's sending a signal there. But yeah, I think you get quite a wide readership there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other questions while we have Aaron up to discuss the position?
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. So that concludes the voting activity for this evening. Again, it is difficult to logistically work through this right now with COVID, but we do want to make sure everybody's vote is counted, so that's why it is important to allow people who couldn't attend in person to also have the chance to vote. So what we will do is allow until next Monday, October 4th, for people to vote. Once those votes are recorded, then as mentioned, we will come in and open up these ballots with a few people present and do the count. If motion number 1 fails, then motion number 2 becomes irrelevant. And then and if motion number 1 fails, then we obviously go back and reconsider.
So then in that light, the emails going out, I presume will only
Yeah, that's a good point, Gord. So everybody everybody registered when they came in this evening, right? So we have a if you didn't register when you came in, if you can sign your name on the book at the back so that we can photocopy who was present for the meeting, and then we'll have a record of who's calling in or emailing in their votes so that we don't have any duplication of votes and that, in case there's any confusion. Thanks for bringing that up, Gord. You said you lived in the US for a little while, right? So that's why we're not using Dominion voting counting machines, and everything. So anyways, I do really appreciate the discussion. I appreciate some of you people actually helping and coaching me through some of these unique procedural parts of the meeting, so that's appreciated on my end. And for everybody coming out, taking an interest either way on how we move forward, it's very important. It's definitely respected by the board, and we will definitely keep you updated on the motions as soon as we have the counts. That being said, would somebody like to make a motion that we adjourn this evening's? Linda Fowler? Seconded? Tom Holmes? Any discussion on that? All those in favor? And motion adjourned. Thanks. I'll just ask for our pastor to come and close us in prayer.
Do you mind if I take 1 second? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so I just want to actually touch on what Aaron talked about. So many of you may not know this, but the average church attendance in a CVOQ church pre-COVID was 56 people. The number of youth pastors is just very small, and as an educational institution, we've always focused on creating scholars and maybe not necessarily pastors. So consequently, a lot of the pastors who are now coming in the CVOQ didn't get raised in the CVOQ. So that's one of the reasons why we're having to look further abroad, is just because we have I don't even know, I'm making a number up, 26 youth pastors in the whole of the CVOQ. And so we just don't have the talent base in the CVOQ to be able to fulfill most of the searches. So consequently, most people are now looking outside the CVOQ. So that's the reason why we expanded. We started in the CVOQ to say, hey, where can we find this person? And when we couldn't find this person within the CVOQ, we're kind of expanding on a more broader fashion. So anyway, just to let you know, some stats. Anyway, let's pray. So Father God, I want to thank you for today. I want to thank you that you've brought us here. God, I want to thank you that you've literally brought us here. You destined for us to be here today. And so God, I just pray that even as you've destined for us to be here today, that Father, that we would be continuing to follow you and where you're guiding us. I want to thank you for every single person, whether they're online or in-house. And Lord, I just pray that you would bless them for the time that they've spent and dedicated to this. I ask these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
For board members, we're just going to meet for our meeting, regular weekly or monthly meeting in the chapel room at the back. Thanks again, everyone.